There is something quietly dangerous about certain kinds of requests, not because they are loud or threatening or obvious, but because they are subtle, wrapped in charm, framed as love, or disguised as need. Most people don't realize you are not just being asked for a favor, you are being assessed. The real question behind some requests is not, "Can you help me?" but, "Will you abandon yourself to keep me comfortable?" It begins innocently. A favor here, a sacrifice there, a silence you keep to preserve peace. But peace that costs your integrity is not peace. It is quiet surrender. And when you begin to bend too far, too often, you will find yourself emotionally tired, physically unwell, and mentally distant from who you once were. This talk is not about avoiding people. It is about returning to your inner authority. Let's now explore the 5 types of requests you must learn to pause and examine, not out of fear, but out of deep self-respect. There is a quiet cost that many women continue to pay without realizing it. It does not come in the form of physical pain or overt harm. Instead, it hides itself in daily interactions, in the invisible exchange of energy between two people. It shows up in the smile you force when you're uncomfortable, in the favors you fulfill even when your body says no, in the silence you offer because you're afraid that your truth will fracture the relationship. The cost is subtle, but over time, it becomes heavy. And this weight often begins with a single thing, someone asking for your energy without acknowledging its value. When a person respects you, they are not only attentive to what they take from you, they are reverent of what you give. Because giving is not free. Every time you offer your emotional support, your attention, your time, or your body, you are pouring from your internal reservoir. The essence of who you are flows out through your actions. And if that reservoir is not nourished, if it is not honored, then depletion becomes inevitable. Consider this: the human nervous system is designed to regulate not only physical balance, but emotional and relational boundaries. Neuroscience confirms that every social interaction either calms or activates your stress response. People who are constantly in your space, asking for your advice, your approval, your service, your emotional regulation, create ripples in your internal system. You may not feel it immediately, but over time, you will notice the signs: a sense of chronic fatigue that no sleep can cure, irritability over small things, and a growing disconnection from your inner joy. Imagine a woman who wakes up each day already feeling behind. She prepares the breakfast, listens to her partner vent about their work, offers encouragement to her friend who's going through another relationship drama, and checks in on her aging parents. By mid-morning, she's barely breathed for herself. Not once has anyone asked how she feels. Not out of courtesy, but out of genuine interest. And this is not unusual. It has become normalized for women to be the emotional caretakers, the energetic providers, the stabilizers of chaos. But what is rarely spoken about is how this pattern erodes the self. To understand the subtlety of this dynamic, we must return to a core truth. The requests people make of you reflect their relationship to your energy. When someone sees you not as a person with needs, but as a source to fulfill their own, they will naturally keep asking. They will continue to draw from you, not out of malice, but out of habit. And unless you become aware of this exchange, you may find yourself pouring into others while running dry inside. There is an old Eastern teaching that says, the one who fetches water from the well should know when the well is empty. But in modern relationships, few look into the well. They only notice the bucket. They see what they can take, not whether there is anything left to give. This is where inner awareness becomes vital, not as a defense mechanism, but as a sacred form of self-honoring. When you feel drained after being with someone, it is not about blame, it is an invitation to observe, to ask yourself, was I seen or was I only used? This is not a question rooted in ego, but in clarity. Let's take the story of Amina, a mid-50s teacher who had built her entire identity around being helpful. Her students loved her, her colleagues leaned on her, and her family considered her the emotional backbone of their home. But inside, she was growing brittle. She couldn't explain why she cried alone in the evenings or why her chest felt tight when her phone rang. Until one day, during a conversation with a colleague, she was asked yet again to just help with a small task. She smiled, agreed, and then, for the first time, said quietly to herself, "I don't want to do this." That moment was small, but it marked the beginning of a powerful inner transformation. She began to realize that not everyone deserved her energy simply because they needed it. She noticed that she had never actually assessed whether the people who made requests of her did so with respect. Many didn't even notice the toll it took. They assumed her giving was infinite, but she wasn't a stream that flowed forever. She was human. The principle here is not to withdraw from others, but to become fiercely aware of who recognizes your humanity. People who truly care for you will not only receive your help, they will reflect concern for your well-being. They will ask, "Do you have the space for this?" They will not pressure, guilt, or manipulate. They will understand that a relationship is not built on constant giving from one side. It is a rhythm of mutual regard. In psychology, this is referred to as reciprocal respect. It is one of the foundational pillars of healthy attachment. When someone consistently asks you to extend beyond your emotional limits while offering little in return, they are not connecting. They are consuming. Emotional consumption often feels like love in the beginning because it mimics intimacy. But over time, it reveals itself through fatigue, resentment, and loss of self-trust. The most dangerous form of depletion is not physical, it is spiritual. When you lose connection to your own needs, your own intuition, your own rhythm, you become vulnerable to the requests of others. You stop pausing, you stop questioning. And soon, you find yourself doing things simply to avoid conflict or to maintain a sense of belonging. But belonging that is based on self-abandonment is not true belonging. It is quiet exile. This brings us to the deeper insight. The people who constantly ask for your energy without offering grounding in return are not just requesting a service. They are shaping your internal reality. Each time you say yes when your body says no, your nervous system records that memory. It stores that moment as a message. My needs are not important. Over time, this becomes a belief, and from belief, behavior is born. This is why reclaiming your energy begins not with confrontation, but with awareness. Not all requests are harmful, but the moment a request is repeated without regard for your state, it becomes a burden. And burdens carried silently become invisible prisons. And now, a more subtle but essential shift, what someone asks of you and how they ask it, speaks volumes about their intentions. We often look at words, but we forget tone. We pay attention to the request, but ignore the energy behind it. There are requests that come as tests, not needs. They are not about the thing being asked, but about control, access, and leverage. Take the example of Zara, a woman in her early 40s, who had just begun dating someone new. In the beginning, the man would casually ask her to cancel plans with friends to spend more time together. He phrased it as affection. "I just want to be with you." It felt flattering, but as time passed, the requests increased. Could she skip her morning meditation to talk? Could she leave work early to meet him? The requests were small, but frequent, and she noticed that each time she said no, he would become distant. She began to feel guilty for honoring her own schedule. That guilt was not her own. It was transferred to her through manipulation disguised as romance. This is where inner clarity becomes indispensable. There is a moment in every relationship where the mask of kindness slips, not through words, but through pattern. Patterns never lie. They tell you who someone truly is, beyond their smile, beyond their charm. If someone only shows up when they need something, that is a pattern. If they withdraw when you set a boundary, that is a pattern. And it is not your job to fix it. It is your task to see it. True relationships grow in freedom. They flourish when both individuals respect each other's rhythm. A woman does not need to give up her solitude to prove her love. She does not need to stretch herself beyond her limits to maintain connection. The right people will never ask her to. There is a phrase from ancient teachings that says, "When the root is deep, the tree does not fear the wind." In life, your root is your inner awareness. It is what grounds you when others attempt to sway you with their needs. It is what anchors you when you are tempted to overextend in the name of loyalty. Loyalty without consciousness becomes servitude, but when rooted in awareness, it becomes strength. Your energy is not a currency to be spent on everyone. It is a sacred essence to be shared with those who honor it. The power to discern begins with noticing how you feel around people who consistently ask for your time, your validation, your attention. Do you feel nourished or diminished? Do you leave feeling seen or simply used? To walk a path of emotional integrity is to realize that some requests are invitations to grow and others are traps to shrink. The woman who sees this difference does not need to argue. She simply chooses, calmly, clearly, without apology. And it is in this stillness that true strength is born. Not the strength to fight, but the strength to choose. To walk away from what depletes. To stay connected to what restores. To honor not only what is asked, but also what is not spoken. For behind every request lies a question. Do you value yourself enough to say no? It is easy to see exhaustion when it is caused by physical labor. A tired body speaks through aching muscles, slow movements, or a heavy breath. But the kind of exhaustion that comes from emotional labor is much more elusive. It wears no visible signs. It hides beneath the surface, often mistaken for anxiety, irritability, or a loss of interest in the world. Yet its roots run deep, and many women carry this weight silently, not because they are weak, but because they are trained to endure it, to be available, to be strong for others, to carry burdens that were never theirs to begin with. What makes emotional labor so deeply taxing is that it is rarely acknowledged. When someone asks you to listen, to soothe their pain, to validate their feelings, or to make space for their chaos, they are not just seeking your time, they are seeking your emotional presence. And emotional presence, unlike physical attendance, requires depth. It demands internal openness, empathy, and often the temporary suspension of your own needs. This isn't just a poetic idea. It's supported by the very structure of the human brain. The limbic system, the emotional brain, activates in social connection. When someone cries, your mirror neurons respond. When someone vents, your body absorbs tension. This is not metaphor, this is biology. And over time, it shapes your well-being. Women are particularly vulnerable to this kind of depletion, not because they are more emotional, but because they are more often expected to be the emotional regulators in relationships, in families, in partnerships, in friendships. They are leaned on, often unconsciously, to hold the emotional thread together, to be the one who comforts, who calms, who keeps things in balance when everything else is falling apart. But no one asks at what cost. It begins with small moments. A partner who always turns to you after a bad day, but rarely asks about yours. A friend who uses every conversation to download her stress, but never creates space for your voice. A parent who complains endlessly, but becomes uncomfortable the moment you express your feelings. These moments, though subtle, create a pattern, and a pattern creates a belief. You begin to internalize the message, my emotions are secondary. My role is to absorb, not to express. There's a story of a woman named Lena who was admired for her calmness. At work, she was the one who mediated conflicts. At home, she was the one who kept peace between her siblings and aging parents. Her husband often said, "She keeps us all grounded." And yet, each night, when she lay in bed, she felt hollow. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was a kind of numbness, as if her emotions had been placed on mute. One evening, her daughter asked her a simple question. "Mom, what do you do when you feel overwhelmed?" Lena froze, not because she didn't want to answer, but because she had no answer. She realized she had stopped even recognizing when she was overwhelmed. She had become so accustomed to managing everyone else's emotions that she no longer knew how to manage her own. This is not an isolated story. It is a reflection of a deeper truth. Emotional labor is invisible work. And like any invisible labor, it can go unrecognized for years until the body begins to show signs. Sleeplessness, frequent illness, tension headaches, digestive issues. These are not always signs of external illness. Sometimes they are the body's way of saying, I am carrying too much that does not belong to me. And what deepens this exhaustion is that women often feel guilty for setting limits. There is an unspoken belief that to be loving is to be endlessly available. But love without boundaries is not love, it is sacrifice. Not the kind that inspires transformation, but the kind that leads to slow self-erasure. True love is not measured by how much you give. It is measured by how much of yourself remains after you give. The nervous system does not lie. It records every moment of self-betrayal. Every time you said yes while your soul whispered no. Every time you stayed silent to avoid confrontation. These moments accumulate. They do not disappear. And without inner awareness, they begin to shape how you feel, how you relate, and eventually, how you see yourself. This is where the connection to neuroscience is vital. Studies show that chronic emotional labor alters the function of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making and self-regulation. When the brain is constantly managing emotional input from others, it reduces its capacity to manage the self. This means the more you pour out without restoration, the less grounded you become in your own clarity. You begin to forget what you need. You begin to accept relationships that drain you. Not because you want to suffer, but because you've lost the space to even notice the suffering. And this leads us to a profound realization. Every time you say yes to someone, you are saying no to something else. In most cases, that something else is yourself, your rest, your peace, your presence. The illusion is that you can keep giving without cost. But energy is not infinite. Just as the body requires food to function, the soul requires restoration to remain whole. There is a quote often attributed to a Zen teacher. If you don't want to burn out, stop living like you're on fire. Fire gives warmth. But if it is not fed, if it is not protected, it consumes itself. The same is true of you. You may be able to carry many things for many people, but you must not carry them at the cost of your own inner flame. And now, a deeper shift must take place. The understanding that selective giving is not a weakness. It is a practice of emotional intelligence. It is the ability to recognize that not every need is yours to fulfill. Not every problem is yours to solve. Not every emotion expressed in your presence is yours to manage. This brings us to a truth that is often uncomfortable, but deeply liberating. Not everyone is entitled to your yes. There are requests that are not true invitations, but subtle tests. Tests to see how much you will bend, how far you will stretch, how quickly you will abandon yourself in the name of peace or connection. Every yes you give must be weighed, not just by the need presented, but by the energy it will cost. And more importantly, by what that yes will take away from your own center. This is not selfishness. It is sacred self-regard. A tree does not give shade to the point that its own roots dry out. It gives what it can, when it can, without compromising its own survival. When a woman learns this balance, her presence begins to change. Her energy becomes less scattered, more centered. She becomes discerning, not defensive. Open, but not overextended. Loving, but not leaking energy in every direction. She begins to live not as an emotional sponge, but as a mirror, reflecting truth, not absorbing dysfunction. And in that shift, something remarkable happens. People begin to either rise to meet her clarity, or they fade away. The ones who stay are the ones who understand that love is not proven through sacrifice, but through mutual presence. They do not test her boundaries. They honor them. They do not take her energy for granted. They are conscious of its weight. And in those relationships, emotional labor becomes shared, not expected. Offered, not demanded. This is the beginning of true partnership, not just performance. To reach this place, however, requires an inner pivot, a moment of deep reckoning. It often begins with a simple question: what do I consistently give that leaves me feeling emptier? The answer is rarely a thing. It is often a pattern, a dynamic, a role you were taught to play without question. Once this pattern is seen, you cannot unsee it. You may still choose to give, but the giving will be conscious, no longer reactive, no longer obligatory, and with that consciousness comes strength. But here is the paradox. To live this way, to give intentionally, you must also accept discomfort, the discomfort of disappointing others, the discomfort of being misunderstood, the discomfort of not fulfilling someone's idea of you. But all of this is the price of inner peace. You cannot live in alignment and be available to everyone's expectations. You must choose, and every no you offer to